Are you a public servant? Are you tired of being beaten up about your salary, your conditions of employment, your pension? Are you aware that many of the economic commentators who dominate our airwaves consider your pension unsustainable, with one well-known financial shock jock famously describing the entire public service scheme of pension provision as Narny economics? Narny economics. Colourful, isn't it? So, what are the facts about pension? Well, essentially, there are two ways in which people provide for pension. The first is to build up a store of money, a fund, which is invested and which is then available to be drawn down annually when you retire. This fund is usually managed by a pension provider who takes a significant cut in handling and management charges, so in fact it can be quite an expensive way to fund pension. How expensive? Well, a management charge or a handling charge of about 1.5%, which would be fairly typical, could cost you between 27 and 38% of your total fund. Now, that seems quite pricey to me. Of course, you might be prepared to accept such high charges if the funds were performing wonderfully well and the fund growth was sufficient for you to absorb the charges. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. In recent times, Irish pension funds have lost about 37% of their total value as a result of poor investment choices. If you are a public servant, it's much more likely that your pension is funded on what is called a pay-as-you-go scheme, which is to say, you pay your contribution to the state, effectively a loan given over a period of time, and the government of the day, in return, undertakes to meet your pension costs when you retire. It's called pay-as-you-go because traditionally governments have not built up specific funds for pensions, but they've used the contributions they receive for current expenditure, and they have likewise paid pensions from current expenditure at a future date. Now, this is where we came in, with people suggesting, commentators suggesting that a pay-as-you-go system is simply unsustainable and Narny economics. Well, it's not. The system of pay-as-you-go has been used to provide public service pensions for the past 100 years in most developed countries, and it's not bankrupted any of them to date. It has survived the world crash in markets generated by Wall Street in 1929, and it will survive this most recent crash. You see, the state is always going to be a better long-term bet than any private investment company. Think of it. Does anybody really believe that Guinness, Coca-Cola, even General Motors, anybody really believe that they're going to outlast the nation state as viable entities? No. Pay-as-you-go has been better described by one economist as representing a social rather than a financial contract. It is a contract between generations. Nonetheless, it is wise, perhaps, to prepare for the day when there may be a greater number of people in receipt of pensions. So, in recent years, the Irish government has, in fact, created a specific pension fund to set against a time in the future, a very limited period of time, when tax receipts alone will not be enough to pay for pensions. Now, happily, some of the more serious drawbacks that I mentioned of funded pension schemes don't apply here. Management charges are negligible, and investment choices tend to be conservative but stable, yielding good long-term returns. All in all then, I think it can be argued that the mechanism for providing public service pensions compares favourably with the system which those who attempt to colonise the concept of reality tell us is the only rational method for pension provision, namely the private funded system. I'll leave you with a question. If private pension provision is indeed a superior method of delivery, why is it that 2/3 of those working in the private sector do not have occupational pensions at all?